Hello and welcome to this video tutorial on how to build your own Icinga web module. In this video we will have a closer look at the Icinga PHP library and how to work with databases. Let's go! So what is the Icinga PHP library? Basically it bundles separate libraries into one bundle. Let's have a look at its components. So if we navigate to the training module again, we can check out the docs and the section on the IPL. So here we see the different components. We have an HTML library, which is useful if we work with HTML in an object-oriented way. We have the internationalization library, which we have seen before when working with translations. ORM and SQL are nice to translate or to work with SQL and translate SQL into objects. The standard lib is all over the place, so it just contains basic functionalities and utilities. The validator package or library is nice to validate stuff like addresses, certificates, or email addresses. And the IPL web provides useful widgets we can include to extend our module. So all of these together are the Icinga PHP library. And we can just include it in our module because Icinga web ships with it by default. So we don't have to do anything additional. We can just include these and work with them. Now let's use the IPL to build something in our module. For that we will set up a demonstration database and then load some data into this database and then display it and work with it within our module. So first let's set up the database. We're just going to use SQLite just because it's simple, but you could exchange that with a full SQL database. But for sake of simplicity, let's just use SQLite. So let me install it. I should be root for that. Right, so that's done. And now I can install the I can load some content which we have provided just for the demo. We can just download this SQL file and initialize our database. So let's do that now. I'm just going to download it on my machine. All right, and now I'm just going to initialize it using the SQLite command. So I will initialize it in Icinga web and then modules training. It's just nice because I can get this path programmatically. So that's why I'm choosing this path. And let's call it assets because it's going to be an asset database. And then just import it. Right. And it's nothing fancy, just let's have a look at it. So it just creates two tables, an asset and a user table, and it will create assets in the asset database, in the asset table, sorry. And those assets are going to be linked to the users via this foreign key. So yeah, it's just some sample data which we can use to extend our module. Now let's do that. Now let's log in just to see what we got. So yeah, still works. And we got our training module already installed and activated. So first let's write some code to interact with the database. I'm gonna write a trait. I'm gonna create a trait here in the library because I might want to use it across my module. So I'm gonna probably have different controllers and CLI commands that will want to connect to the database. So let's write it in a common place. So let's create it, database. Okay, so now I'm gonna just initialize my trait. So let's don't need that. So yeah, it's gonna live in the module training namespace, and I'm gonna use the IPL here, more precisely the IPL SQL, and I want the connection class. So then let's create a trait. Let's call it database. You can name it whatever you want, but I think database is a nice name for it. Right, so now we want a private attribute. Let's just call it DB, and a public function, which is called it get database or get DB. And now what's going to happen is we're going to load our config directory. That's what I meant before. We can just load this directory programmatically and then just concatenate it with the name of the database we just created. So this is for SQLite, but imagine having a full MySQL server. You would just set that up the same way. So yeah. If we don't got a database connection already, we will create one. It's going to be an SQLite database, and yeah, that's just going to be the path, and then just return the path, and that looks good. So the connection, once it's opened, we can use it to talk to the database. If you want details on that, the training module has a separate chapter on that. It's called Working with Databases. So here you can see the example we just did, and this would be an example if you talk to a MySQL server. So setting up a user password, even TLS, transport encryption. Now we connect to it, we can disconnect, and then we can use this connection to talk to the database. So this is all this does now. And now, since we got a trait, we can just use this trait in our classes and have the get database function. So let's use this trait. I'm gonna create a controller. I will call it just the assets controller, since it will control the assets. Same again, it'll live in the controller's namespace. Now I'm going to use the IPL webs controller, which has some more functionality than the controller we saw before. Let me just see here. Yeah, this is the Icinga web, let's say default controller. The Icinga web IPL controller provides some more functions. We want to use that one. And now let's import our database trait and set up the controller. So I'll just call it the assets controller. It'll extend the compat controller, stands for compatibility. And let's use the database trait. Like this. So now our controller is able to talk to the database if it needs to. But first we need to set up some models. And by models, I mean we want to create something that represents the data in our database as PHP objects. Since I don't want to write SQL queries, I want to work with objects just like any other objects here in PHP. So let's set up some models. I will create a new directory called model. You can name this differently. I'm just going to place all my models into this directory, and let's just call it the asset PHP model. All right, it'll live in a namespace, and now we are going to use the IPL ORM, so the object relationship model, I think it's called. This will now represent our asset in the database. So just as a reminder, we have assets that are in this table. So they have an ID, user ID, serial number, and manufacturer. And this object will now represent assets in that table. So in order to be a model, I need to fulfill some stuff. I will need to provide some functions. So a table name in which the models or the, let's say, objects live. Yeah, they're key, so they will just have an ID, and their columns. So these are all the columns which I want if I request an object from the database. So let's save this, and that's it. Now let's see if it works. So we're gonna load an asset now from the database. So let's check out our controller. And now we want to use the asset we just created. So let's include it here. and we already got the database connection, or the function that will, the method that will provide the database connection. And now let's set up an action for this controller. So I'm going to use a special action here. It's the index action. The index action we've seen before with other controllers. They have a named action like list and show, and I will have to navigate to list or show. The index action, I don't have to specify a path. It'll just call the index function, the index method, when I call this controller. Now let's set up a title. Let's just call it the assets, and then just query the database and return the assets. Right. So since I'm using the IPL ORM, I got this nice function called on, and this will need a database connection to retrieve the assets. So since I have this nice little trait, I can just pass it in, and this will now query the database and return the assets. Let's see what happens. So I'm gonna save this. I think I saved everything else. And yeah, let's check it out. So it should be under assets, and I don't have a view yet, but that's all right. We don't need that view at the moment, since we are going to use a widget that will provide this view instead of us having to write HTML. But just to see if the database connection works, let's just do this and see if the query is working. So let's see. I think I need to exit here so it won't render. Yeah, let's see. Looks good. This is the query now. We need to resolve that query. And we do that by saying, for example, first, I think, yeah, looks good. Now we got an asset, and it has some properties. It has an ID, it has a user ID, serial number, and a manufacturer. So this is now an asset, and yeah, I could store this in a variable like so. My asset equals. And now I can work with it just like any other PHP object. So I don't have to write SQL. I can just work with an object, and it's much nicer than having to write queries. Let's just remove this. So we don't want to create some HTML. We want to work within the PHP object context, and we can do that by creating HTML widgets, let's say, with using the IPL. So let's do that right now. I'm going to create a folder called just widget. Again, you can name these whatever. It is conventional in official modules that this is called widget, but sometimes these are called web or other names. I'm just going to widget. And let's create an asset table widget. This widget will now render a table, and I will feed it the data from the database. So I know it's a bit, I don't want to say complicated, but convoluted maybe, but it'll make sense at the end. I'm gonna do a small recap at the end to clear things up maybe. All right, let's go. It's gonna live in the namespace widget, and I'm gonna use an HTML table provided by the IPL. So I don't have to write a lot of boilerplate. I can just use, because lots of stuff comes in tables, since we're using SQL all of the time. So the IPL just provides that for us. And I'm gonna create this asset table, and it's gonna extend the IPL table. Right. Here I can define some properties. I can say this object now has default attributes, and these are just going to be a common table. We have seen that before in the file list. Next, I'm going to have a protected attribute, let's call it assets. This will contain the assets I will pass to it. So now let's have a small constructor. that'll just take the assets from the database and store it. And that's that. And now we have a special method which will, let's say, do the magic. This is the assemble method. And each HTML element which the IPL provides can use this method to assemble itself into a valid HTML object. By that I mean I'm gonna write some PHP code here, and it will then be rendered into an HTML into HTML. So I don't have to create these views and have the HTML here. I can just write PHP code that will then be turned into HTML. So I don't have to context switch all the time. I can just stay in the PHP mindset and work with PHP all the time. So let's do that right now. I am going to, since I already am a table, I can just set the HTML header. So what I would do with the table head here, I can just do in PHP like this, and then I can fill in the assets. By that I mean the assets that I just got here, and I can use it. I can use this variable to just create rows in my table. So I'm gonna get the body, and I'm gonna for each asset that I got, just gonna insert a row into my table here. So let's save that, and let's just take a step back and see what's gonna happen. So I created a database connection. I'm gonna get some data which will then be turned into an asset. This asset I can load in my controller like so, and I'm going to pass these assets into the widget asset table like so. And this widget is an HTML element provided by the IPL HTML, which can turn itself into HTML using the assemble method. So basically all that I need to do now is to extend my controller. Let's do that. So I'm gonna import our new little asset table, and instead of printing that out here to the console or whatever, I'm gonna instantiate a new asset table like so. I'm just gonna pass it the assets, and now all I need to do is say the controller now has content. So I'm gonna add content. Which content? This needs to be, so the added content needs to be an HTML element. And since I'm going to extend from table, which itself extends from an HTML element, this should work now. And yeah, I reloaded the page, and now we can see all the assets as an HTML table. So let's have a look at it. Yep, like this. And you can see it's a table with the common table class because I provided it here. And it has the header, which I specified here. We don't have any users assigned to it yet, but we don't need to right now. And now our for each loop will create rows in that table. So yeah, that's basically it. How to create models, how to connect to a database, and how to avoid having these PHP, HTML templates by using base elements and adding content to the controller. So I can create whatever I want here. As long as it's a base HTML element, I can pass it into the add content method, and the controller knows, oh, I don't need to look up a view. I can just render that because that's HTML. So let's finish up by adding a menu item here. Let's just go in our configuration and add a new section. So like this. So we're just gonna name it assets and link to our new controller. So if I now reload, I can see the assets now appearing. And if I click on it, I will be on my new asset table. We could extend this functionality, so we can now have pagination or search bar or sorting functionality. If you want to learn how to do that, you can check out the training module. And we have in the IPL section, we have a lot of content on how to do that. Yeah, so here we have an example on how to create pagination and sorting capabilities. And the next item will be how to create a search bar. So you can use this to extend your asset table. If you want to see videos on how to do that, let us know in the comments. We can create additional videos on these extended topics if you want. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and let us know which topics you want to see in the future. Bye.